Now we are working towards so then there was our first edition of the African Herbal Pharmacopoeia, with all the multiplicity of contributors from around the world. A lot of them now retired. So now we are working towards this the second edition, right? So what's changed between the first edition and the second edition?
Well, I think technology's changed, probably, is the big thing. One, the analytical methodology for chemical analysis has improved hugely, and the costs involved, and the ability to get HPLC and get a much more precise chemical fingerprinting and profiling, whereas before that whole process of chemical fingerprinting and profiling was new, very expensive, and we just couldn't do it at the time. We didn't have the facilities, I don't think there were many people in Africa who had the equipment. I think only CSIR was one of the only places who had highly sophisticated analytical equipment.
Yeah, but Denzil, ultimately this whole project is really aimed at trying to support commercialization, right, of African ingredients.
Yeah.
How has that changed since 2010 up to now? What do you see? What are the trends in terms of demand for African ingredients?
I see the demand as being very, very big now. I see the regulatory environment in which it as being very limiting and has slowed the development internationally quite considerably. It's become far more expensive and far more difficult, for instance, to get baobab flour into the market or baobab leaf and things like that. You have to get novel food legislation. That whole novel food legislation of the EU, which I was heavily involved with fighting against bits of it, and I think was a big barrier. I mean, on the other hand, you could argue that the safety of Europe's population was the most important thing to protect. That was always the thing that they said with the regulator. But those regulations are no easier. Their barriers are still very high and very expensive. So, as Ben Eric has many, many times said, considering the number of medicinal plants that are indigenous to Africa, the percentage of those plants which have been commercialized and globally launched is tiny compared with, say, the number of plants that India has in relation to the number that they commercialize, or China has that they commercialize, or Europe has that they commercialize. So the European herbal industry is very much European, using
as it should,
plants.
As it should. But I guess if one were to look at the African environment, they are commercially available, just not maybe it's not a lucrative environment, because obviously everybody has access to the products. And the North American markets, are they taking up any of these African plants?
Yeah, well, obviously innovative companies started to try and get around the rules, not so much get around the rules as to, American market is much more easy to get into because, herbal medicine, if you like, is
dietary supplements.
The umbrella of dietary supplements. They don't call it herbal medicine. So whereas we never had that, and that's caused slowdown. So that grew hugely. I mean, the dietary supplement, what they call dietary supplement, this is a misnomer. It's not. It's nonsense, of course.
Yeah. So what are some of the big species that you're seeing, say, in North America, African ingredients that are getting into North America?
Well, all the aloes have always been big. I mean, there's been a traditional thing about aloe that has grown. But again, aloe vera, which originated, as far as we know now, according to Kew Gardens, somewhere between Kenya and South Africa, not quite sure, but that part of the world, somewhere along the eastern coast, southeast. It moved to the Caribbean and to Texas and to Venezuela and that sort of Caribbean, southern America.
Yes,
as an industry. So there are lots of things like that.
And then shea,
yeah, I mean, shea was again always there, but that's under the beauty. Well, shea again is an interesting one because the real market for shea is not what you think. It's nothing to do with medicine or cosmetics.
Yeah.
It's as a cocoa butter substitute because that industry was driven almost entirely by a strange regulations in the United States which allowed chocolate manufacturers to add 10% shea butter to chocolate. Because it was much cheaper. If you look at the price of cocoa butter and compared with shea butter, it's a third or less, it's a fifth. So obviously they wanted to do that. So massive quantities of shea are sold to the chocolate industry. And the proportion of shea nuts that go into cosmetics are very small compared with that. And the proportion that, the medicinal, or to me, functional, I mean, it's a medicine, I think, and a food. It's a very important cooking oil, for instance, traditionally.
Yeah.
So that's the story of shea, and again, it got sort of caught up in words. Is it a cosmetic? Is it a food? Is it a medicine?
Well, it's a useful plant, right?
And it's huge, and it's massive. The quantity of the shea belt. I have to thank that again through luck. I ran into a guy called Peter Lovett, Dr. Peter Lovett.
Yeah.
He's English, who was married to Ghanaian and studied at university. And he is surely the world's greatest expert. And he's both a forester and a phytochemist. So he knows science and he went all over Africa. And I learned a lot from him about shea. What other plant? Well, obviously, traditionally, Roselle subdarifa, hibiscus subdarifa, again, very big in Germany and Switzerland, and has been traditionally used as a herbal tea.
Where is that coming from? Is it from Zimbabwe or?
No, mainly from Sudan. The best
from
is from Sudan, and it was always from Sudan. But then the Sudanese lost the market.
Yeah, and then of course myrrh, because that's what you've been involved with now, right?
Sorry?
The boswellia.
Yeah, boswellia. Well, that's another one. Yeah, frankincense. Again, new to me. I didn't know much about it 10 years ago. Again, it sort of came onto my radar screen, and because I was sent by Neil's Yard to Oman, and it was from Oman, not Africa, that I learned about it.
Yeah. So what's the difference between frankincense and myrrh?
Oh, totally different. Well, they both have similar end uses. They're both aromatic and medicinally important. They both grow in similar sort of semi-arid regions, but it's a very different plant. Myrrh has a slightly bigger distribution and they're more complex, but there's a lot of integration because there's frankincense-smelling myrrhs and there's myrrh commiferas that smell like frankincense.
You have to have a very good nose for that, right?
Yeah, you have to have a very good nose. Lots of mixed up botany, which is another lesson I learned throughout my career. Those botanical names and botany, almost every plant I have looked at, where was it originated? What are the true names? Is this the only variety? What other, is this really a unique species or is it a subspecies? All that sort of stuff with almost all of them. Every, particularly African plant, a lot of muddle. A lot of muddle.
Yeah. Okay, and then so it brings me, you're joining us from the Caribbean, and now I know that there's this interest in the so-called slave plants. Maybe tell us a bit about that.
Well, obviously, in the last 10 years, I suppose, mainly coming from the States, but not just. Still a growing awareness here of the history of slavery, uncovering the untold truths about the horrors of slavery and trying to get restitution, trying to understand it as well, and you know, how did it work? I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday about the triangle between rum, which we all drink in the Caribbean. The sugar was taken from here, which is was one of the largest sugar producers in the world, sugar cane, was shipped to England or to the colonies, America, or the English colonies, made into rum, which was sold, and then that money was used to buy slaves to bring them plant the sugar. So it was a triangular business. And a lot of people don't understand. So that sort of inquiry is taking place. What really, how did it work? How did slavery work? And obviously, so there's a lot of people researching about the humans and the suffering, and how many there were, and where did they come from, where did they go, but very little else about the plants that they brought with them and how did they survive over the journey, and what did they grow here and what did they eat. And also the fact that the Caribbean, that's how I got interested, has very few indigenous plants. Not many indigenous, there weren't many people living here. And so where did they come from and how did they get there? Obviously some came from the Amazon, because that's the nearest big landmass to here. I look out my window.
Okay.
Can't see South America, but it's relatively, birds could bring seeds over, people could bring them on canoes. So you obviously have a bunch of stuff from there, but also this whole channel of not just the slave, but also the slave masters, the people who fed them on the ship. What did they bring over? And that's become, you know, there are one or two people in America who've done a lot of work with this. Red rice, for instance, was woven into the hair of the slave women, in their long hair, seeds, and they brought them hidden in the seeds and planted them in Suriname and Guyana. So they had a lot of these African red rice varieties which are unique to Africa.
It's interesting. And then you talked about the aloe barbadensis, is that it? Aloe vera.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people thought it was Barbados aloe.
Yes.
So when I started inquiring at Kew Gardens about it, they said this is a load of nonsense. It's not actually Barbados. It's Barbadensis, and we now call it aloe vera. But it's probably more the Barbary coast. The Barbary coast is the coast of Africa, you know, along the Indian Ocean area from Kenya.
Okay.
So it's probably more likely to be Barbadensis, Barbary.
Okay.
Certainly, it's a Southeast African plant, not a Caribbean plant, which a lot of people thought. So I can take you to people on the street here, and they'll be absolutely sure that aloe barbadensis is a Barbados product.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay, so there's aloe. What are the other plants then that would be of interest? Slave plants.
Well, yes, I mean, moringa came across, although whether it was African or Indian, because often Asian stuff came via Africa. So Asian stuff was bought by traders to Africa and then moved on. So
cannabis.
Cannabis, yeah. Do we know where cannabis indica? Are we sure cannabis is Indian? And surely not African.
Chinese, and then you know, India, through India, Africa, into the Caribbean, I guess.
Mordica geranta is a very big product here.
Okay.
Obviously, that's grown That's a big medicinal plant here.
And how developed is that you know, sort of natural products industry in the Caribbean?
Not very well developed. I was heavily involved, as I told you, I was the EU for Africa, Caribbean. There's some big players. Dominican Republic's doing a lot. Cuba, because of their isolation, is the most advanced in terms of herbal medicine, for sure.
Yeah.
Pharmaceutically as well, in general, because they had to produce the pharmaceutical industry. Dominican Republic, but because it's so close, the Caribbean to America, the tendency is to lean to buy everything from the States.
From the US, yeah. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Yeah. So we're about to close. I just wanted to find out, you know, a few general questions. So, I mean, what can we learn, or what should we be doing as Africans around building again, you know, the industry? From all the things that you've learned, all the places you've been to, what do you think we are doing right, and what do you think we should be doing better?
Well, I think you're doing right in terms of screening of material and researching material, you know, knowing what you've got. I think there's much more knowledge now about what biodiversity you have and what you. But I think the two areas where you're not good at all is industry. You know, it's still an academic or a government-run business, if you like. I kind of a commercialization that step. Takes from an individual healer who makes a product on the side, and then marketing. You need, and the other thing I think we learned, the European and the American industry is based on import, not to be afraid too much of if you don't have the right product in Kenya, then bring it from South Africa or the other way around. Or Africa's a big place, man. You could start trading your products in your countries, you would have so much richer diversity.
But we want the product to go to Europe first, get formulated, then we import. Yeah, it's just crazy. Yeah. All right. Well, so I've been talking to Denzil Phillips and on the Legend series. So you can like the page, you can follow, you can make comments. But finally, Denzil, you know, this life lived with, you know, all your experiences and things like that, what would you tell your younger self?
I think basically somewhat similar to Elon Musk. Never believe what you're told. You know, if somebody tells you this plant's no use or that plant's not good, or don't believe it. Double check everything you can.
Be curious. Yeah.
Don't be pushed away. Don't give up. Just keep going. You'll get there. Have faith in your own knowledge, your own beliefs. Look what you're opening up, a whole world there. Right?
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think with that we will close, and you are a real legend for those of us that know you, and we look forward to continued collaborations well into the future and hopefully to building this industry. Thank you very much.
Keep AAMPS going. Yeah.